Hi, it's Brett Elliott and we're back with part 8 in the series Ultimate Energy Healing. In the last few videos we've talked about connecting, resonating with healing energy, and also we've talked about the vertical flow of healing energy and also how we need to open ourselves up in order to receive it, to tune into it and allow it to enter ourselves. And the fact that this energy comes from above, from an infinite, unconditional source. So those are some of the things we've talked about, but today what we're going to do is focus on the simplicity principle, because simplicity is a key to open up the channel for healing energy to move. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about simplicity and how it relates to energy. A great example of the difference between simplicity and complexity is the atom. For example, the hydrogen atom, this is what we've got here, has only got one proton and one electron. And that's the most simple element when you look at the periodic table. And interestingly, it's the most abundant element in the universe, hydrogen. So that's number 1 on the periodic table. And this is a very simple element. And it's the primary source of energy for the sun. So the sun is primarily running on hydrogen under the process of hydrogen fusion. And interestingly enough, that's the primary source of energy for life on Earth also. So the most simple element. And when you think about hydrogen, it's also used in things like balloons, that it'll make something lift up and rise above. And that's a great thing about simplicity, is when things are simple you feel light. And the opposite end of that scale would be something like heavy metals, for example, lead or plutonium and uranium and those things that are very, very complex and have a lot of, like up to 90 or more parts. And those are very, very heavy, and they sink. We also know that other simple elements that are used by the human body, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, they're very simple. In fact, most of them are below the number 6 on the periodic table. And these are the elements that are used in the human body for life. But other things such as heavier elements like heavy metals, like lead, plutonium, uranium and things like that, they have a lot of energy stored in them, but it's not really available, it's not easily used. So the simpler the element, the more accessible it is by the human body for life. And you could say we're a bit like this when we're born into the world, that we come with this very pure and simple approach. Nothing much has happened to us, we haven't had any experiences, we're just like a clean slate. And so our energy is freely available. And one way of looking at this could be that the energy within the cell, such as the DNA, which is where the information comes from to create a healthy body, is being sent out, and it's duplicating new cells, it's creating new proteins, it's telling the body how to function properly. And there's no interference, so we get a healthy body. But as life goes on, things come at us from various angles in life, and they have an effect on us. And those things cause us usually to retract in some way. So our experiences can be, I don't know, some of the first things we experience when we're born is we might get jabbed with a needle, or we might get slapped, or we have some pain, we have some experience, and it causes us to retract and contract. And as we go through life, these things become more and more complex and difficult to deal with. And you'll be familiar with this, when you go to school, you might get bullied, or you might have negative experiences with friends or with family, with parents and so on. And so these things come at us and we tend to withdraw and contract. And what we do is we develop a more complex way of dealing with life. And as we go along, these things become more and more difficult. As you would know, with money, with finances, with relationships, with work, with all of these things. So life gets more complicated, and once again, we develop more and more responses to those things. And so as you can see, we're becoming more complicated. And the reason I'm drawing these shapes getting gradually more complex is because it's a bit like hydrogen is becoming a heavy metal over time. So as we go along, things get more difficult, our systems get more complex and more complicated. And you could say that these systems are perhaps our coping mechanisms, or our attitudes, our beliefs, our opinions, and our worldview, a structure that we develop within ourselves. And this can become very complex. And so, symbolically, this is what it may look like. So within ourselves, in our DNA, or within our inner energy, in our healing energy, and our source of life and light and energy, is now becoming a little bit trapped within this more complex structure. And what this can do is can cause us to feel pain, stress, energy built up inside, and also it can make us feel like withdrawing from the world because we've got too much to deal with internally. So this is very symbolic of complexity. And when you think about it, people that live a simple life, that maybe live on an island or in the country even, are usually more healthy. In fact, those populations don't tend to suffer with the same conditions that we do in the more developed world and the city environment, which is where we get the most sickness and disease. And so it's directly connected with the degree of complexity versus the degree of simplicity. So in order to heal, and also in order to open up the channels within us for healing energy to move, we need to simplify the process. Another way of looking at this would be when you consider animals in the wild. I mean, the main problem an animal in the wild is going to have is running out of food, and maybe a bit of combat for a mate, for example. But other than that, they lead a relatively simple life, and therefore don't suffer with the kinds of diseases that we do as human beings. So what do we need to do? Well, the simplest answer is usually the right one, and that's what this all comes down to. We need to simplify this process, and we need to get back to how we were in the beginning. So we can't always avoid the things that are around us, but we can simplify our process of how we deal with those things. And we can simplify our thought process around the different things that are happening to us in life. And of course, going back to the previous video, meditation is a great way to do that. But we're going to talk about this further in the coming videos, about how we can use our mind and intentions to purify and simplify our process. As we break these things down and we simplify our process, what we're going to end up with is energy being released. And this energy being released is going to show itself as heat. So the end result of all energy in the universe is ultimately going to be heat, as things are broken down and processed. And it's the same thing with healing energy. As we break things down, as we simplify things and we process them and we let them go, we're going to end up with heat energy. And of course the healing energy is responsible for doing that, and it's just a matter of how well we connect with it and how open we are to receiving it, how much of this heat we're going to experience. And so heat, when you're doing this self-healing and using this healing energy, is a really good sign that you're making progress. And in the coming videos, we're going to talk about how we can move this energy down through our system and also radiate it outwards from our bodies, and how we can use food and how we can use herbs and our mind in order to channel that energy. And also, we're going to talk about our hands and what we can do with our hands to heal ourselves. So I hope this has been interesting, and look forward to talking to you in the next video.